Chinese President Xi Jinping pursues deeper engagement and economic development during a historic visit to the Middle East. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C., and this is The Heat. Chinese President Xi Jinping outlined multi-billion-dollar investment plans for the Middle East during a diplomatic visit to the region. President Xi met with leaders in Saudi Arabia, Egypt and Iran and discussed a host of issues including energy, security and China's One Belt, One Road initiative. All three countries play a critical role in the stability of the Middle East with ongoing conflicts in Syria and Yemen. Joining us now from Paris is He Wenping. She's the Director of African Studies at the Institute of West Asian and African Studies in Beijing. Also with us from Bahrain is Mohammed Noman Galal. He's a former Egyptian ambassador to China and Pakistan and an author. And from Tehran, we have with us Mohammed Marandi. He's the Dean of the Faculty of World Studies at the University of Tehran. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Wenping, let me start with you. This is the first major diplomatic visit by President Xi of 2016. He's visited three major countries in the Middle East. How significant is this region for China?
Well, this region, I think, is very important for China, especially for the Belt Road Initiative, because all those countries in the Middle East, they are not only those anchor countries for the old Silk Road, and also will play a very juncture role and linking China with Asian country and all the way to the European country. So, and not only that, because this region also has lots of different, I think, diversified economy, diversified different civilization, and also very complicated situation in terms of like those crises you mentioned. Syria, civil war are there, Yemen, war are there, and even when we go to Iraqi and Afghanistan, so it's not stable. So that caused a great challenge for China to push forward this Belt and Road Initiative. So that's why with President Xi's visit to Middle East countries, he put forward not only those economic cooperation plan, but also put forward those peace and security proposals. Not only cover the Palestine-Israel issue, and also cover like Syria crisis, Yemen crisis. So he put forward China's policy, foreign policy on those crises and the conflicts.
Well, let's look at one of the countries President Xi visited, Egypt. Dr. Galal, since the Arab Spring, Egypt has been struggling to find its financial footing. So how important was this visit for the country?
Yes, this visit is very important for the region and the Middle East in general, and in particular for Egypt, for three reasons at least. The first reason, that Egypt and China established diplomatic relations in 1956. And that was the first Arab and first African country to establish diplomatic relations with Egypt, with China. Egypt at that time helped to China to be engaged in the world, especially in the Middle East and in Africa, while they were besieged and boycotted by many European and American countries. This is the first one. Second one, that now we are opening a new chapter in the relation of the two countries after the events of the so-called Arab Spring, which was not really a spring as it proved to be. It was some event which has very dear consequences, as what is happening now in Syria and Libya and Iraq and many other countries, in Yemen and so on. Third, this indicates the willing of China to come into the forefront in the international stage. This because China has been for some time is a low-key player in the Middle East and in many international issues. Now it was some sort of a shift in the importance of Middle East in the political arena and political international policy of China. And it should have been now and not too much late, because China is a big power economically and a country with a civilization. The Middle East is a cradle of civilization and many religions. So China should not be late to come into the Middle East, and it is coming in more peaceful way, not in a military way, not in an invasion or occupation, but is in a peaceful way, or what we call soft diplomacy.
Dr. Marandi, Iran has already been a major trading partner with China. China, in fact, was buying 40% of Iran's oil even before sanctions were lifted by the United States and its allies over Iran's nuclear program. Now that those sanctions have been improved, now that we have the visit by the Chinese president, do you expect that this relationship is going to be more cemented and is going to grow very quickly?
Yes, I think the relations will expand dramatically over the years. Iran, of course, is a major trading partner with China. Iran exports large amounts of oil through the Persian Gulf and the high seas, but the future really that we're looking at is the ancient Silk Road, and the development of the ancient Silk Road between Persia and China, or Iran today and China, is really a major event. There are going to be railways as well as highways that link these two countries, and it will be passing through Central Asia. And it will bring about enormous benefits for both countries as well as the countries in between. And this will help develop West China as well as Iran. In addition, the Iranians will be able to export oil and gas through Central Asia, and so will Iraq most probably if things progress as well as it is hoped. The only concern, of course, is the sort of extremism that we have seen in Afghanistan and Pakistan and the Wahhabi extremist groups. If they get a foothold in Central Asia, that could bring ruin to the whole One Belt, One Road initiative and even create trouble for Chinese security. So it is very important for the two sides also to cooperate closely with regards to extremism.
Wenping, of course, the One Belt, One Road initiative is a signature plan of the current Chinese president, Xi Jinping. How does China see it? How does it see the Middle East fit into that plan?
Well, this plan now at the current stage is still an initiative, but Chinese government has regarded the year 2016 as the opening year for pushing forward this great initiative. So if you see all those initiatives that will takes the China, like the capital city Xi'an, as the starting point, starting city, and then cross all the way to like through the Middle East and all the way linking with the European countries. So that's for sure. The Middle East is the juncture. It's a juncture place. So you cannot imagine we start this linking with the Middle East countries, and then you can skip over all the way from China and then to the European market, to the European country. So definitely we need a very prosperous and peaceful Middle East countries. So we think in terms of economic cooperation, and we are very complementary between China and the Middle East countries. For example, China now are facing a lot of like extra industrial capacity. We need to find a place to digest those overcapacity, and we are very good about infrastructure building, enjoying very competitive advantage. And also in Middle East countries, as far as I know, even though they have very rich resources, but the industrial level is still not as high as that level in China. And also infrastructure, they also need to be upgraded. So for all of that, I think we can find a lot of sectors to be integrated with each other. So for economic cooperation, definitely if this One Belt, One Road can be integrated with those national development strategy, like in Egypt, like in Saudi, and also in Iran, especially after the sanction lifted, Iran also needs to develop greatly for their infrastructure, for their industry capacity. So I think that will be, release those potentials for bilateral and multilateral cooperation. So, of course, the peace and security is another sector that China now is willing to make more and more contribution. As my colleagues has mentioned, China now, we put forward our initiative like a Middle East policy. President Xi mentioned clearly three no's. Those three no's refers to we are not going to seek any proxy in that Middle East country, and also we don't want to seek any hegemony there. And the third no is we don't want to fill in any so-called security vacuum there. So that's a different approach comparing with those Western countries. Those approaches has been long implemented in the Middle East area.
Right, Dr. Gilal, President Xi expressed support during his visit for Egyptian efforts to maintain stability in the country. How important is it for Egypt when it hears something like that from the Chinese, this effort to maintain stability there?
It is very important because China is a big power, and as the Chinese professor mentioned, China said 3 no's. And President Xi is keen to follow this, not to intervene in other countries, not to seek hegemony, and so on. So that is very important because the Middle East is suffering from regional as well as international intervention, sending terrorists from neighboring countries, advocating certain sectarian ideas, trying to export revolution. China is not doing these things and not interfering in the internal affairs of Arab countries or any other country. And that is what is called the peaceful rise of China and the 5 principles of China to base their partnership on a solid base, that win-win game. Win-win game and non-interference, non-intervention, respect for the sovereignty of other countries, not to seek any hegemony or to seek any exporting of its ideas or its type of democracy, for example, like many other countries. So that is very important. Egypt is following also the same policy because Egypt never intervene into other countries or exporting its ideas or its religious approach and so on. So that is makes China and Egypt are closer to each other and they respect the other countries and they are keen to follow a real policy of respect for the independence of other countries and their sovereignty and territorial integrity. We don't have in Egypt any ambition to invade other countries or to try to be hegemonic for the other countries and so on. So if with this visit of President Xi Jinping, now we are on the same boat, as one can say, that we have a meeting of mind, meeting of policies, and even the charm and between the 2 presidents.
Okay, we are going to have to take a break right now. More of our conversation about President Xi's visit to the Middle East right after a break. Stay with us, you're watching The Heat. Welcome back to The Heat. We're discussing Chinese President Xi Jinping's 3-nation tour in the Middle East and China's vision for peace and security through development. Joining our panel from Riyadh is Jamal Khashoggi. He's a Saudi journalist and the general manager of Al Arab News Channel. Thanks for joining us. Jamal, let me start with you this time around. Let's look at some of the details of President Xi Jinping's visit. China pledged $15 million in special loans to boost industrial production, $10 billion in trade credit for joint energy projects, and $10 billion in soft loans. When you look at this, how important is this kind of investment for the region?
No, it is good, it's excellent, it is very important, but it's also sum up China's foreign policy. When President Xi made that tour of 3 nations, that each one has a very much different view about the future of the Middle East. Some of them are even in confrontation with each other, but he left the 3 capitals all happy. China wants the good of the Middle East, oil and trade, and wants to leave the bad and the ugly, which is the wars, the politics, the confrontation. But I don't think they should take that for granted. I think the Chinese should get involved because it is world peace at risk right now, which is related to China. It will have an impact in China. China depends on the oil of the Middle East, whether Saudi oil or Iranian oil, and they must play a role there, and a positive role. What is the problem of the Middle East for all of us and for China? It is the falling states of Syria, Yemen, and others. We need to build those states. Expansionism of Iran is affecting the balance of power in the Middle East and affecting those civil wars and fueling those civil wars. We need to work together to stop such policies of expansionism and sectarianism and revert to good practices, neighborly practices that will lead to those beautiful dreams of cooperation and Silk Roads, etc.
Right, but the other important thing for China about this visit, we do know that China is a growing economy. Its growth is not as high as it used to be, but it's still growing. It has huge energy requirements annually. It imports 60% of its oil. So to what extent was this visit about securing those oil supplies for China?
Oh, for sure, they're going to get that, as long as those confrontations we have on the Middle East are limited to Syria and Yemen, and it doesn't go beyond that. But there is a risk that the confrontation between Saudi Arabia and Iran can go beyond. Of course, both countries do not want such a confrontation, but to let this Iranians meddling in the Middle East and Saudi Arabian necessary response to keep the Iranians off pay, and that will lead to a confrontation. So I would like to see more of Chinese effort to bring peace, reconciliation between various countries in the Middle East and bring peace and order to the Middle East. Peace and order will not be guaranteed by securing the victory of a dictatorship, but by prevailing democracy in Yemen, in Syria. That's what the people are asking for. That is the essence of the Arab Spring, which is a very true phenomena that has come to the Middle East, and it will not go away till it achieves its goals.
Okay, let me go to Dr. Marandi in Tehran. Dr. Marandi, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, praised China for its support during the years of isolation and sanctions that Iran faced. How important is that diplomatic support for Iran?
Well, it is important, and Iran is a country that remembers those countries and friends that stuck with it during difficult times. And Iran will also not forget the actions of those countries that tried to hurt it and tried to hurt the region. Linked to what Jamal was saying, China, because it doesn't have ambitions in this region, and it does not have a history like the United States and Europe of colonialism, it has a good opportunity to expand trade. And in the case of Iran, it's especially so because it can do this through Central Asia as well as the sea. But with regards to security, Iran and China have much more, I think, to offer to each other than anyone else. Because when one looks at the region, one does see, contrary to what Jamal says, I believe that it's quite clear that the United States and the Saudis have played a very negative role in exporting or allowing Wahhabism to be exported across the region. About a month ago, when Zahran Allouche, the head of the terrorist organization Jaish al-Fath, was killed, both the Americans and the Saudis, and sort of disturbingly, Human Rights Watch, the head of Human Rights Watch, they expressed regret. But this is a person who explicitly online has supported Osama bin Laden. He's justified his alliance with Al-Qaeda, and he spoke about crushing the heads of minorities. So this is the reality of the situation that we're looking at in the region.
Okay, Wen Ping, let's talk about China's role in the region as far as being an honest broker, being neutral in the various disputes that are taking place. During his speech to the Arab League, President Xi Jinping said, quote, "The key to overcoming difficulties is to accelerate development." And the Chinese leaders stressed that turmoil stems from lack of development. So what does China bring to the table on the one hand, investing in the region, on the other, trying to act as that honest broker and bringing peace to the region as well?
Yes, the China's concept of security is thinking the development, only the development is the fundamental factor to maintain peace and security. Yeah, that's our understanding about security. But at the meantime, as we just heard our two colleagues from Iran and from Saudi, so it's not easy to bring a full understanding between those two countries, and also bring peace to hold the region, because the Syria war is there, Yemen war is there. It's not easy. So I don't think China, with this good intention, with this three nodes policy, and then we can bring a magic thing happening in the Middle East, and also seize all those conflicts immediately. So we don't have that magic power, but we want to call upon a kind of idea and understanding. That is, only the development, only the dialogue and the political settlement can be the way out. Because through many years war there, people in the Middle East cannot see hope. And those war in Iraq, those war in Afghanistan has been proved again and again. That is only through the force or the fighting. And then you cannot find peace. You cannot find the solution. Only the people suffered. So that's the message we want to bring to the region. So even though this time around Chinese President Xi Jinping visited like Iran and Saudi, even though we know they are in the dispute right now, they're cutting ties with each other. So I think President Xi continued to make his trip. He didn't make change of his schedule. So that is, he wants to bring this peaceful message and call them to calm down and to to ease the tension rather than to build down tension. Of course, we are not saying we are side with who and who. So I think it's up to them to resolve their problem.
Jamal, one of the challenges that Saudi Arabia faces right now, of course, is the falling oil price. If we look at the trade numbers between China and Saudi Arabia, that trade is worth something like $69 billion. That was in 2014. Now we look at the falling oil price. So how will China's investments in Saudi Arabia make a difference?
I think Saudi Arabia has enough reserve and enough economic power to continue with its trade relation with China, and to continue in building various projects that the Chinese are involved in, including introducing nuclear energy into Saudi Arabia. So this is going ahead with no effect with the oil prices. But what could hinder such activities is the peace and security in the region, and that's where I think the Chinese are not putting big weight there. They're expressing good hopes on sending good advices, but that is not enough. We should apply measure of international laws, see who is sending militias, who is fighting the people of Syria and Yemen, who is not helping in the negotiations that is coming in Geneva. And let's work together to bring peace. It is and stop confrontation. My friend Marandi spoke about the risk of extremism. Yes, extremism is a problem to us, but it is a result of the falling Middle East. It's a result of the dictatorship and the war that waged by Bashar al-Assad on his own people that led to the rise of extremism. So we need to address those true problems. We must accept the essence of Arab Spring and help those countries reach safety, which will benefit all of us, including China.
Right. Dr. Galal, the Lebanese economics minister, Alan Hakim, is quoted in The Economist news magazine as saying that China should play a leading political role in the region. And we had another official from the Gulf Cooperation Council says that the Gulf is looking to diversify our political relations and China is foremost among the targets. So what are the nations in the Gulf looking for from China as far as political cooperation is concerned?
The GCC countries, they have keen interest that China should advise all the parties in the region, especially in the Gulf area, that they should not intervene in the internal affairs, or as Khashoggi mentioned, that not to sending Malaysia, or any sleeping cells to other countries and so on. The most important that everybody in the Middle East, and particularly in the countries in the region, not to seek any hegemony, regional hegemony, by spreading their type of religion or their type of sect or things like this. And China, from this point of view, could be a model that it doesn't interfere into the internal affairs of any other country. It doesn't want to change countries to their own type of political system or its economic system and so on. But one most important element is that China is one of the 5 members or permanent members of the Security Council. And here China can play a role when they set the record straight, when they find any intervention by any other country to call the spade a spade. That is very important, and they are in good relationship with all the countries in the Middle East because of their policy of some sort of neutrality.
Okay, that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for joining us. That is it for this edition of The Heat, but the conversation continues online. Join us on CCTV America's Facebook page to comment on this or any other show, or chat with us on Twitter at CCTV_America. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.